It was time to turn back the clock and remember how things used to be. But we weren't allowed to dwell on yesteryear for too long.
Mercury with skill, turns his man inside out, goes for goal, it's close.
The talk of mergers is in the air, and there's a premiership for which to be fought. One club with that premiership knack has rediscovered the art of winning. The Eagles hammered and undermanned North Melbourne and sent a message to those riding them off. And as round 7 started last Wednesday night, Darren Buick would set out to complete one of the great personal comebacks of all time, as Essendon, like West Coast, returned to its imposing best.
It certainly was a great performance from Darren Buick. Good evening, thanks for joining us on Football Feedback again. I'm Tim Lane. Mergers dominated the front page of yesterday's Sunday Age, and speculation about an imminent marriage is rife. Rohan Connolly, author of yesterday's controversial story, is one of our weekly panellists, and we're hoping he will divulge all tonight. Former North Melbourne and VFL President Dr. Alan Aylett will also join us as we talk through football's thorniest issue. Essendon skipper Gary O'Donnell will be with us to discuss last Wednesday's energy-charged match at the MCG. It was a night of mixed emotions for the Bombers. Buick's comeback was sensational. Michael Long's knee injury took some of the gloss off that memorable evening. And former Hawthorn champion and current-day chief executive Peter Hudson will also be here tonight. But right now I'm joined by one of Hutto's former teammates, Lee Matthews, whose dreams of a comeback have been shattered after his team went down in the reenactment match.
There's no way I'm looking at the replay of that game because I'm sticking to my illusions and not the facts.
How did you pull up?
All we did is jog around the MCG for half an hour, so you couldn't get hurt. But I must say it was great fun. I think we just all enjoyed just being out in the middle of the ground again and just sort of looking up at the stands and having
hearing the roar of the crowd in the
back
ears.
in the sun for half an hour, yeah.
Good to see.
Yeah,
it was great to watch. Rohan Connolly, of course, with us, as he is each week, and well, a busier week for you than for Lee, I think, Rohan.
Yeah, I feel like I've been playing a role in All the President's Men or something the last few days, little secretive meetings in car parks and things like that. But I mean, that's the way the merger debate tends to go these days. Everyone hides behind a veil of secrecy or paranoia, if you like, even. And I don't think you're going to get people going on the record with this stuff, but we're very happy with our sources on it.
Rohan, we'll be back to you for more in just a moment, but we should welcome Dr. Alan Aylett, the former VFL president, North Melbourne's first premiership president back in the 1970s, and he's a guest to talk about it. Alan, could I ask you firstly, will it hurt you if North Melbourne enter into the first merger of Melbourne clubs, or will you be pleased?
Well, I'm certainly in favour of mergers, and it wouldn't worry me. I've got views about who they should be merging with, but I think that if North Melbourne are one of the first clubs to be involved, I think that that's a very, very positive step.
Rohan, if I could get back to you for some of the background, I don't know how much you can tell us, but when did the story first emerge for you at the Sunday Age?
We heard from people first late Wednesday, and there began the chase, I suppose. I mean, just it was a matter from then of trying to get people from either club in the AFL to confirm it, which is a tad difficult at the moment. But look, as I said, I mean, it was a source we're pretty happy with. We think the information's pretty solid, and really, I mean, the Sunday Age hasn't been want to jump into these things on a whim before. I mean, we just felt like it was pretty solid info. We should do a good, thorough job on it and explain fully how a merger between North and Fitzroy would work.
And Rohan, percentage-wise, how close is it? I mean, do you think it's like 90% there or 70%?
Well, yeah, there were some whispers going around on Saturday that there could be an announcement as early today. I mean, we reported them as rumours. We didn't say that was going to happen. I mean, look, I suspect you probably wouldn't want to make an announcement during the season proper, would you? But I noticed Mark Dawson today on behalf of North Melbourne said that these things wouldn't be discussed until the season ended. Well, I don't buy that because, I mean, these things take a lot of setting up. You've got drafts and things going on out of the season. I mean, they do take time to formulate the administrative structure, even debates like the emblem, what goes on the jumper. It's all emotional stuff, and it would all take a lot of time to set up, and I'm sure clubs will be talking about these things right through the season.
We might talk to Alan in a moment about timing, but can you tell us how close to the action your sources are?
Well, someone asked me if it was yesterday, if it was straight from the horse's mouth, and I said, well, you know, maybe not the horse, but maybe a stable hand. So, you know,
plenty of those.
It's someone who's, well, people who are close enough to know what's going on, and that's why we've gone so hard on it.
Alan, timing. How difficult must it be for a club to actually get something through at any time, let alone in the heart of a football season? And in North's case, in the midst of a campaign which they hope will net them their third premiership.
Well, it's a difficult one, and that's been the problem really over the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, there's never a right time. If you go right through the whole year before the season starts, everyone believes that they can win this year's premiership. And then as the year goes on, week by week, there's always something that's occurred in the club to warrant the board's attention. And before they know where they are, it's coming up towards October the 31st, the end of the financial year. It's never been the right time. But I'd just take the view, if I was involved, that I'd be open about it and I'd discuss it and I wouldn't hide anything. I don't think there's anything wrong with it at all. And I mean, the football public out there these days aren't fools, you know. I mean, they know what's going on and they know what a difficult challenge it is for particularly the Melbourne-based clubs to make ends of the budget meet each year. And I really do believe that that the people involved should be up front.
I wonder how Dennis Pagan would feel, though, if the cards were on the table that North Melbourne were.
Well, I don't think it really affects Dennis Pagan or the North Melbourne players. I really don't. I mean, whatever. And any other club, I'm not saying North Melbourne are even involved. I'm not privy to any of the information that obviously Rohan has got, but any club, I just don't think that it affects the players at all.
In fact, that's one thing I probably do disagree with, because anything that's happening at the club, players get asked about in their work and in their private life. So, and that's the thing that I must say myself when I was coaching, and Dennis would be concerned about, is it's a distraction to what the players are doing, because they constantly have to respond to people's questioning, and that'd be the thing I'm sure Dennis would be unhappy about. But that's the small picture, really. We're talking much larger picture than just what's happening this season.
It's not going to go away, whether Dennis or Noonan or Baum, you know, whether they... I mean, people are going to ask the questions, and they're asking them now, I would think.
Lee, that was hardly the comment of a coach. That's only the small picture, what the club is doing during the course of the season. I mean, when you're coaching, it's the biggest picture.
Well,
it's the only picture.
No, coaching is the small picture. Coaching's about this week and next month.
That's right.
Coaching's not about next year.
But when you're doing it, surely it's all that matters.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's the small picture. It's now. It's the here and now. And I mean, the club has to be able to put itself in a position of thinking 5 and 10 years ahead. Well,
exactly.
That's something that you don't expect a coach to do. It's not his job.
Well, Lee's comment's very interesting, because to me that just suggests that if we conducted these discussions more openly and involved supporters, members of either side, I mean, why can't we have an adult, rational debate about it without all the furtiveness? And I think if it was thrown open in the arena, the players would know what's going on. They'd probably feel a lot more comfortable with the whole
because probably
issue.
the players don't know either. The North Melbourne players would know more than we do.
Yeah. But when if you take a positive attitude, I mean, it could be the most exciting thing of all time.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, that's the attitude I'd be taking, really, with whichever club I was involved with. Because I really do think it could be one of the most exciting things that have ever happened to any club and to football. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it.
You're convinced that a merger will work, in that the supporters of the two clubs will swing behind
the only reason why we don't like talking about mergers, people bring up history, and they talk about the history of the club, all the rest of it, but when you really think about it, the only time we sort of fall back or call back on history is when someone's in trouble. But I mean, history's being made every day. Like we've made history today, and we'll make history tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day. And if we look at making history by getting together the best merger that could possibly happen, well, that to me is just making fantastic history. And if it's setting up a club, whichever two clubs, to make them a real power in the AFL for the next 20 years, I don't suppose you can even go past that, but if you can really establish the power base of two clubs, that's very exciting stuff to me.
I think there's a lot of logic in the union of North Melbourne and Fitzroy too, Tim, just given, well, Fitzroy obviously is pretty much gone beyond recall, but North, ever since Alan's days at the helm there, has been a very progressive club. They were the first to establish the niche market of Friday night football. Have a look at this year. They're wearing a redesigned Guernsey in half their games. I can think of a lot of other clubs that wouldn't be game to do that. And their support base seems to be developing. They seem to develop a lot of younger supporters, and they seem a lot more disposed to the idea.
North have been very, very progressive and probably led the way for the last 25 years with all the things that have happened. In 90% of the things that have happened, North have led the way. But I don't necessarily sitting here say that I believe that North should merge with Fitzroy. I mean, I think that North, if they do happen to merge with Fitzroy, well, they shouldn't finish there. They should go to another club as well, because I don't think that merging with Fitzroy is going to correct either North or Fitzroy's problems for the next 20 years.
How many mergers do you think there should be ultimately? And how much can Melbourne stand its landscape in football terms to be ordered?
Well, just to make sure that everyone understands, what I'm really saying there is that I think a North Melbourne and a Melbourne Football Club merger would be fantastic for North, my club. And if North merged with Fitzroy, I think that those two clubs could still merge with another club and make it even better. And why not Melbourne? So I wouldn't just stop there. But as we spoke on your program on Saturday, Tim, I think it's very hard to say how many clubs should merge and will merge, because the marketplace itself is going to take care of that, isn't it? There might be a couple of mergers, there might be more, but year by year by year, the marketplace is going to tell us how many clubs should be merging and consolidating.
Do you think there'd be any mergers if it wasn't for the $6 million AFL kind of incentive? Do you think anyone would genuinely think in merging? That seems to be like an artificial stimulus, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and it probably does spur people on.
Yeah.
But I think that you could, again, they'd want to be looking further than that. I mean, the
over a 10 or 20 year period, it doesn't sort of equate to that much over a long period.
No, it doesn't, does it? I mean, you really want to be set up better than just getting $6 million and paying $2 million to out there and another $2 million there, and perhaps having $2 million in the bank. God, that'd go, as we all know, in 12 months.
Yeah.
It's got to be a much deeper thinking than just the $6 million. That helps, of course.
And do you think has anyone got... Seems to me that there's very few clubs got genuine merger aspirations. They've got a few have got takeover aspirations, and a few would like the $6 million and a few players. But the mentality of the clubs to actually meld together the two would be better than one.
I think you're right, Lee. I think you're right. But what I'm saying is that if you took the other approach, the positive approach, and came at it from the other way, well, it'd be very, very exciting.
We better leave it there. Alan, don't go away. We might involve you in some of our football talk, our real football talk still to come, but thanks for joining in on that issue, which is pretty close to your heart. Would you like to be at North Melbourne or at the AFL at the moment and be a part of all of this?
Oh, yes, I wouldn't mind. I mean, I had my go, I must say, as the club president for 6 years and chairman of the AFL for 8 or 9 years. But no, so I've had my go, but this is very interesting stuff to me. Yeah, we'd make it happen.
Okay, I'm sure you would. Stay with us. Well, Melbourne have been in the news in the last few days. Neil Baum's throwaway line, it might have been that we're no bloody good, captured the headlines on Friday, and the Demons didn't exactly dispel that with a sorry performance against the Sydney Swans at the MCG, beaten by 44 points comprehensively in a low-scoring game on the Saturday. At the moment, they're 1-6, 15th on the ladder, and with a percentage of 51.2. For the last couple of days, people associated with the club have been involved in a think tank at Hepburn Springs, and the media asked Neil Baum about that at his post-match media conference at the MCG on Saturday.
Oh yeah, no, that's totally, that's nothing to, well, maybe something to do with it. I've been told. No, it's a deal that they've had in strong stream for a while. It's more a future directions thing for the club. And obviously we'll talk about our current predicament, but that's not what it's designed for. And so I don't, at this stage, feel as though that's going to be an important part of the agenda, but I don't know that for sure. You better ask someone else. One game when you get beaten by 7 goals against Sydney, who, only a fair side, they're not a great side, it would have to be very disappointing for us. But at least we got something to work on for next week. I mean, you don't have to say everyone was no good and start from scratch. At least we had a fair go at it.
Light at the end of the tunnel now?
Oh, I mean, who knows? There always is. I mean, we got to play Hawthorn next week, and we reckon we can beat them. So there's a lot to do between now and then, and who knows? But we're certainly pretty positive about it.
The record of the bottom four in which Melbourne are entrenched is a rather pitiful one. Over their last 15 games, so a total of 60 between them. They've won only 10, and Fitzroy have been responsible for 5 of those victories, as against 48 losses. It doesn't read terribly well. Rohan, do you know much about the Melbourne think tank?
Well, Ian Ridley apparently said recently that mergers were discussed, but only in a general philosophical sense, and trotted out the what's becoming a favourite party line, we'd be irresponsible if we didn't discuss them. It's funny how everyone says that, but when you get down to tin tacks and specifics, everyone runs a million miles away. But look, basically, it's a long-term sort of think tank. They're talking about a number of football issues as well, recruiting, but importantly, shoring up their long-term financial health or otherwise. And Melbourne have to be a prime merger candidate in terms of the speculation, just given their on-field performance lately, and off-field they haven't been travelling very well financially.
And Lee, what about Neil Barnes? We're no bloody good. Was he unlucky? Was he badly treated by the newspaper?
Well, it's one of those sort of throwaway lines that certainly doesn't sound good or read well when it's reprinted, and you'd like to know what context Barmy said it on in, but if it said, Barmy, how's things going? He said, what do you think? We're losing every week and my team's no bloody good. I mean, I suppose the point is you can't state facts, can you? You've got to keep the public relations campaign going, and Barmy certainly wouldn't have liked to have read that when he did.
I think one of the difficulties of print journalism is conveying the appropriate sense of irony that went with that comment, and knowing Barmy, I'm sure there was plenty that went with it. But there's no great secrets about Melbourne at the moment, is there? I mean, I know it's a bit boring, but injuries have just decimated them, basically. I know that Melbourne last week put together what they considered their best possible side, and you had 9 or 10 missing players were part of it. In fact, all 6 of the forward line, that included Schwartz, Lyon, Charles, Hilton, Glenn Lovett, Paul Primke, Craig Turley in the centre. You're talking about 4 of their 5 on the goal-to-goal line. That's an incredible amount of talent to take out of any side. Take that out of Brisbane at the moment, they'd probably struggle equally.
And you were there on Saturday, Alan Aylett, at the MCG. I fancy, as Lou Richards and Peter Landy and Bob Skilton used to tell us on Channel 7 in the early 80s, they'd be your second favourite team, the Sydney-siders.
Oh, it's good to see them win. Yeah, I will.
Second favourite team? Or first
yes.
favourite?
Oh, no, that'd be number 2, definitely.
We might just have a look at a few clips of some of the action, and Jimmy Steins was given perhaps the most perilous job in football, the task of cutting across in front of big Plugger. Lee, I don't think even you would have liked that role.
I didn't even like being down that end of the ground, let alone in front of Plugger. But no, that is a dangerous job, and I think we see a clip even in a minute where Jimmy sees how dangerous it is, but when he comes charging out at the ball Plugger, he's a big, fearsome man, and that's one there where...
Ouch.
You've got to make sure the man in front of you knows that if he stands in front of you, there's a fair chance he's going to get run over the top of. And Plugger's pretty good at making players aware of that.
Was he close to the wind there with that late stiff-armed attempted spoil, or was that what you instruct your defenders to go out and do?
Well, I mean, I think he made contact with Jimmy's side of Jimmy's head probably, but the ball was in the vicinity, so I mean, you're pretty hard to be too. The benefit of the doubt always has to go with the player.
The spoiler.
Yeah.
He's had the benefit of the doubt a few times lately. We had the Dustin Fletcher fence incident the other week. I was sort of on Plugger's side on that one, but maybe we should have accumulated points, and once you build up a certain number of demerits, you cop a tribunal appearance. Yeah, a couple of them flirted a little too close to the line.
But that's one of the strengths. He's aggressive. He's an aggressive forward, and I think that's one of his strengths.
Let's not stop all of that too much. Really, I mean, we've got to have
we've got some clean skins here, I can tell you. I have to battle these blokes all the time about this stuff.
Do you like trial by video, Alan? No, the way it's been applied?
No, I think that's gone too far. On the goody-goody side to me. Yeah. I'd rather just... I think that they should just watch that a little bit. Yeah.
OK, we might just have a look at another one, and big Plugger at the heart of the action again. This time the other end of his anatomy came into play after he had actually taken the mark. He was the ball player here, Lee. You'll be impressed.
Player with the ball?
But, a little careless with the bottom end.
I'd call it a tangle of legs and bodies. That's all.
So would I, Lee.
You see? Simple, just ask us, we'll tell you.
You've got one thing you've got to say about Plugger. He's come up with some amazingly inventive misdemeanours over the years, hasn't he? Involving just about every part of the anatomy.
Some amazingly inventive ways of hurting people.
Oh yeah.
Yes. I don't think that one, no. I mean, he fell awkwardly and he sort of let Rhett maybe dropped his leg on top of the other people, but I mean,
This sounds like a replay
very
of some
mild.
of Jack Gaffney's tribunal hearings. There's a tangle of legs.
I think
He slammed into him a fist with his jaw.
I think he could kill someone in those days and get a severe reprimand.
Do you get a shocking feeling, Mick, that we're in the morality of the 60s and 70s and not the 90s?
Oh, I do.
Truth and justice might lie somewhere in between, perhaps.
Might do.
Set plays is something we've talked about quite a bit in recent weeks, and here's one involving Greg Stafford and Troy Luff, who actually comes in and relieves Stafford of the ruck contest, and Stafford, obviously aware of it, takes off, as you'll see in a moment. Interesting one, Lee. Takes Stones with him.
Yes, I'm just wondering how much of an actual set play that was, or whether it was something they worked out at the time. I mean, it may well have been a pre-planned situation that Luff, who was playing centre-half forward on Lamprell, who, well, Luff's a little bigger, but not that much bigger than Lamprell, I suppose, that gives the Swans. But a lot of clubs you'll find, when there's boundary throw-ins in the forward pocket area, the attacking team will run its players away from the contest to uncrowd it, basically, because you don't want a crowded contest if you're the forward team. And that worked on that particular occasion. Be interested to know whether that was a pre-planned situation before the game, or that's just something that happened at the time.
It was Simon Garlick who ran into the open goal, and he, in a dull game, gave we commentators just something to have a joke about in the second half as he breathed fresh life into the Swans.
Yes. It was very good, Tim. I was listening. It went on and on and on too.
Yes, it was a dull game, wasn't it?
Well, the game, but also the comments. No, very smart.
Actually, Greg Stafford was one of the shining lights, this emerging Swan big man, and Rod Eade, his coach, talked about him at his post-match media conference.
Oh, he was terrific, Staff. Like his first half, him and Steins both played virtually at opposite ends of the ground and both had a bit of the ball, but third quarter we asked Greg to be a bit more attacking and try and take Steins out of it, and I think he thought he sacrificed his game very well. We probably had only 3 or 4 possessions, but I think he created space enough for some goals.
That's been a bit of an Achilles heel for you, hasn't it, for Sydney in the last few years, trying to find a ruckman? And
Yeah, well, he's, ever since the Collingwood game where he was taking over the number 1 spot, he's just answered every challenge and he's played very well against some very good opponents, and he's only 21, so he's still got a lot of learning to do, but he's a very smart player, and he's got that thirst that he just wants to learn, so, which is good. I think it's going all right at the moment as far as victories, but I mean, it's still early in the season, we're only a third of the way through, and as with the age, you can tell that with the players that will have hiccups along the way, and that as long as we keep learning and the spirits and the characters at the moment, they'll make too happy.
Horror start for Rod Eade with that hammering at Football Park, but since then the Swans have really gone on, and they haven't been beaten in their last 5 matches. Alan, think they might make the 8?
I think they've got every chance, yeah. I mean, they're doing everything right, aren't they, really?
It's amazing how every coach refers to his side as a young team. Is there any old teams in the competition? Sydney wouldn't be a young team, would they?
There's an old team on the park
average?
on Wednesday night at the MCG.
Well, that was a real old team. Geriatric, I think.
You were a coach. Did you call them young?
I was the young. All my players were older than me, and they wouldn't listen to me. That's why. Yeah.
Well, Lockett and Roos and Kickett certainly round out the average a bit, don't they? But I mean, essentially, they do have a rather large core of youngsters. I think. I mean, it's what you regard as a youngster, isn't it? I guess under 21 probably fits the bill, doesn't it?
Rohan, we better let you get away and get back on the merger trail.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking of changing my name and changing residence too, but we'll see how we go.
And Alan Aylett, thanks very much for joining us
Thank
tonight. We'll be back with more football feedback, including Essendon skipper Gary O'Donnell, shortly.
For everything as far as Fitzroy loyalists were concerned. For they signalled an end to 22 weeks of misery, 22 weeks of loss, 22 weeks where the life had been sucked from this proud football club. As that final siren sounded and Fitzroy's triumphant players were swamped, talks of mergers, takeovers, bottom lines and extinction were forgotten. For a change, football was back on the agenda. For in the midst of all the off-field politicking, the great game can so often be overlooked. It's true, there were only 5,000 there to rejoice in this win. But look at the faces. They belong to the people who are the essence of the game, The lifeblood of football flows through their veins, and on Saturday, the heart of every Lion threatened to burst with pride. It was, as they say, a great day for football.
They are actions and passions and emotions of people that love Fitzroy Football Club. They are the passions of the people, if you like. And I always like to think that this game and the clubs belong to people and not to corporate entities.
They were great scenes indeed at the Whitten Oval. Good evening. Thanks for joining us again on Football Feedback. I'm Tim Lane. We'll take time out to focus on Fitzroy's great win tonight. It's first for the year, of course. Jim Steins, who is now only one game away from rewriting the history books, will join us as a special guest. Hall of Fame demon Robert Flower will also be with us, and Peter Dacos and Rohan Connolly will be along with their news and views. But Football Feedback wouldn't be the same, wouldn't happen. There would be no Football Feedback without Lee Matthews. Good evening, Lee.
Good evening, Tim.
I'm getting on your right side.
And do you think Fitzroy should be fined for allowing their supporters to invade the ground?
Disgraceful scene,
Disgraceful
wasn't
scenes, wasn't it?
It was terrific,
Disgraceful.
actually. And I was thinking, Greg Champion, in one of his many songs, said that deep in our hearts we all barrack for Fitzroy. They're the most lovable team we've got. Have you got a bit of Fitzroy in you?
Only because you usually beat them twice a year. That's why we like them.
You're a hard man, aren't you?
No, it's true. That's why everyone likes them. No one likes anyone who wins all the time, but because poor old Fitzroy have been the perennial losers. I don't know whether people like the Bears as much now as they used to when they lost more often. I mean, now that they're winning all the time, I'm not quite so sure about whether they was popular with the Melbourne people.
Grizzly bunch of bears instead of those cuddly koalas that we used to enjoy so much.
Yeah.
Rohan Connolly from the Sunday Age joins us each week. Rohan, good evening. Welcome along again.
Thanks, Tim.
The heads of the agreement between North and Fitzroy, have they been signed?
Well, that's what our information says, and our information's been pretty good up to this point, I think, so we've got no reason to doubt that. And yeah, it's been interesting to watch people attempt to put out spot fires all over the place over the past week, but look, the essence of what we reported a week ago I think has been borne out, and something is definitely afoot. I mean, our legal understanding of heads of agreement is that it doesn't necessarily have to be legally binding, but in principle the two clubs are believed to have agreed to merge.
I wonder how legally binding it might be. Ross Oakley was quoted today as saying that heads of agreement normally are.
Yeah, well, I'm not a lawyer, and that's what our legal information was on Saturday, that it wasn't binding, but there was a document that had both clubs agreeing to a merger.
So 7 days after you exposed it publicly, what are the percentage chances of it actually getting across the line, would you estimate?
Well, ironically, probably a little less because of it having been exposed. But I mean, I just go back to the point that we made back then, and I think people have been making pretty consistently ever since, that if both clubs had been up front from the beginning on this one, or at least when the news first emerged that there were talks afoot, the whole thing could be conducted in a much more rational, adult sort of debate rather than...
Isn't there a contradiction there, though? Because you're saying the fact that the news came out might have helped torpedo the merger.
Well, only because it's been conducted in such a air of secrecy and cloak and dagger negotiations and things, I think. I mean, the only merger that's worked successfully in Australian senior football to date, Woodville and West Torrens, did so, from my understanding, because both clubs and the hangers-on and parties of both clubs were totally frank about what was going on, and enabling the members and supporters to feel they're part of the decision-making process is crucial, and North would have only got its supporters offside during the past week, I think.
Well, more on the merger issue in a general way later on in the program. We're about to talk Tribunal, though, and we will be crossing there a little later tonight. But we do have news that Grant Tanner of Geelong, who was up for striking Greg Williams, has been suspended for 1 week. And it continues a bad trot that the Cats have been having so far this year. He becomes the fourth player from Geelong to be suspended so far. Bill Brownless out for 4 weeks after a pre-season incident. Brad Scholl went for 2 pre-season. Gary Ablett, of course, the most notable one, for 5. Many players up on wrestling charges. Brenton Sanderson for 2, so Tanner, in fact, now becomes the 5th Geelong player taking the pre-season into it, pre-season and 8 rounds of matches to have been suspended. Peter Dean is facing the music at the moment. That's a big one. He's been reported on a kicking charge. Some might say a little trivial, but he has to face Neil Bizzy and co. And Bill Brownless did cop 4 pre-season on a kicking charge, which also, I think, by the Cats was considered to be rather trivial. We'll see Peter Dean's incident a little later on. Do you have an opinion, Lee, on that sort of thing?
Well, I think we all know that there's many a thing that looks accidental is actually deliberate, and that benefit of the doubt is usually given to the player. Unfortunately, with Peter Dean, while the incident is really frivolous, it's hard to say it was accidental, and whenever you kind of throw a leg, the tribunal seem to throw a leg, sorry, choice of word. Whenever you try to kick someone, or throw a leg in a kicking action, the tribunal don't seem to like that, and so you'd think Peter Dean will be lucky if he can actually evade the wrath of the tribunal, I would think.
There's still a stigma associated with it. It was considered the most serious charge,
which is
wasn't
ridiculous,
it,
isn't it? I know I'd much rather a kick in the leg and a punch in the face, and you're probably going to get 4 weeks for a kick in the leg and 2 weeks
Might go back to the days of those old steel cap boots that were capable of doing a fair bit of damage.
Well, that may well be the case, actually. It's probably where the origins of it come from, possibly.
I think there's a bit of a problem with, there are some charges which just in black and white sound terrible, and kicking's one of them, but I think anyone who's seen the Peter Dean incident or others of that ilk would concede that there is such a room of degree for seriousness. I mean, a fully fledged kick to a person's body is a very serious thing. A little sort of ankle tap type thing doesn't hurt anyone. So I think personally, I think the tribunal tends to overreact a bit sometimes to the description of the charge rather than actually looking on each charge on its merits.
Let's talk about everyone's favourite story of the week, Fitzroy, and their first win of the season, coming almost a year to the day after their last win, also in round 8 over in Adelaide last year, and a magnificent victory it was. And there is a place for the underdog, I think, in any competition, isn't there? And we wouldn't want to make it so even and homogenised that we didn't have these emotional, sentimental occasions.
I think, though, the important qualification is that even, people talk about the cyclical nature of football, and it's hard to see Fitzroy ever reversing that now, I mean, it's just too far gone. There is too big a gap between them and the other clubs. Having said that, I know a lot of people have been saying during the week that they should have made the move a lot earlier, that they're now too far gone to even be an attractive merger candidate. I don't think that's very fair, because that really begrudges these supporters, the chance to hang on to every last shred of the club they knew, and that's their right and should always be their right, and I don't think it's for anyone else to tell Fitzroy people what they should be doing. It's totally their decision. But I mean, those scenes were fantastic, weren't they? I agree. I mean, it's great to see the underdog get up.
Lee, what would the merger talk have meant to Fitzroy and North Melbourne last week? Was it a coincidence that they both won? One of them particularly against the odds?
Well, I wondered about that, made the sort of observation of that. Normally anything that's happening around the club that doesn't affect the upcoming game and the specific game can be a detraction. Not necessarily, but it certainly can be. But certainly last week it didn't work out that way. I mean, North Melbourne jumped into their game with absolute focus and concentration, and obviously Fitzroy did too. And maybe the Fitzroy have got that added thing of, if we're going to be in a merger, we better prove that we're worth being in the merged club. So possibly that's even upper for Fitzroy. But maybe, I think even before the season started, however, playing Fremantle at the Whitten Oval was always going to be one of their 2 or 3 best chances of winning a game.
I think there's a little irony in the fact that since, particularly in the past couple of weeks, as people have started to look at Fitzroy as part of a merger combination, they've started to go through the list and actually have a closer look at some of the players, and it's clear there's a fair bit of young talent there. I mean, Rombotis has shown a fair bit already. I think Scott Bamford's probably proved he's one of the better interstate recruits so far. Mellington, 6 goals on the weekend. So people are now starting to see that a few years down the track it's potentially a reasonable sort of combination.
Carter was outstanding. Primus looks as though he's going to be a very good ruckman. Boyd obviously is a good player, but Malloy and Johnson and Hawking have been there for a couple of years now and are coming on. So yeah, they do have something that seems to contribute to a merger, which might be the most positive thing in reality to come out of the victory. Well, for the fans it was like a flag, but for Fitzroy's first-year coach, Mike Noonan, it was a case of keeping feet firmly on the ground as he spoke to the media after Fitzroy's win.
The worst fear I have is that people treat this win as some sort of grand final. Good teams do this every week, and I think that's the target one has to set. I think the relief is more to do with the football side of this club, that they've been working very hard to rebuild and re-establish a group of young men that can do something in the future, and there were some positive signs for us today. So, that's what I feel relieved about, that we can start to finally see the signs starting to take place on the scoreboard.
Well, it looked as though he might do something with Fitzroy, and that was the first clear sign that perhaps Mike Noonan has been achieving something with the young Lions. Well, to North Melbourne, Lee, and they and Corey McKernan are making you look pretty good. They were your tip for the flag, and you were saying a couple of weeks ago that McKernan is about the most influential player in the game.
Well, I
now.
think he's the most valuable player because he's a ruckman and a key forward in one player, and there's not too many like that. But no, I did think before the season that North, because it was going to be hard for Carlton to get everything together 2 years in a row. That sort of, and on that basis, I thought North were the team that is most likely to challenge them, and I think I'm even more convinced of that as the season's gone on. But on Saturday, they were very good offensively, but their tackling pressure was just fantastic. And I mean, they've beaten Richmond, who I think are one of the top 3 or 4 sides too, by like 6 goals, 19 behinds. I mean, that's an absolute thrashing in general play, and that was with Wayne Carey being held to an average game. And I think it is to the situation. If McKernan or Carey play well, North usually win. If they both play well on the same day, well, you can shut the game.
It would have been unthinkable a year or so ago, but McKernan now seems to occupy the sort of status that Carey did last year. I mean, sure, they're both great strengths, but I mean, McKernan's just phenomenal at the moment. I mean, personally, I think there's 3 standout players in the competition. He's one of them. The other 2 are Fitzroy and Hurd, but he's just fantastic.
He has such an influence on the result of the game, I think. I mean, on Saturday he's had 18 kicks and 6 handballs, a lot of stats, 10 or 12 marks. His centre bounce work and even his centre bounce clearances, he was just an exceptional.
Well, he had 7 centre bounce clearances on his own, I think 6 in the last quarter, and even just about half a dozen or so of those great big knock-ons that went 30, 40 metres and were as good as a possession. I mean, he's everything wrapped up in one.
And we know what he does. He does the ruck work, then he goes into the forward line, and each week I go and watch North Melbourne play. I'm wondering, what are the opposition going to do? What are they going to be able to do tactically to curb the influence of that play? And no one's been able to come up with anything yet since last year's preliminary final, probably when Justin Madden stayed and did the ruck work, and Anthony Koutafidis covered for him when McKernan went forward. And I think that's the kind of approach that opposition sides need.
Interesting point about the 3 stars of the season that you nominated, Rohan, Koutafidis, McKernan and Hurd. It looks as though there's been a bit of a changing of the guard, and a sudden one, because they have become the superstars. We might discuss that a bit further later tonight, or perhaps some other night. But let's go to the North Melbourne coach's post-match press conference, and he turned on an aggressive display after all the merger talk during the week, which created a new headline for the Kangaroos.
How different was this week in terms of preparation compared to a normal week, given the off-field stuff?
Well, from my own point of view, our training was first class, and when you play a player like you did last week, you would expect nothing less. There were a lot of distractions, a lot of innuendo, a lot of lies, a lot of inaccuracies said about the North Melbourne Football Club, and stories that were in the press. We're pretty disappointed about that, but to our players' credit, they just focused on the task at hand, played like real professionals, and went out and did the job when it had to be done.
What was a particular thing I've heard you a couple of times on radio and television say lies and innuendo about the North Melbourne Football Club?
I don't want to get... Well, you
mean that the deal wasn't done? Is that the thing that really...
No, look, the thing that was just the inaccuracies and being so close to it, knowing what was going on, and people going off half-cocked without even following their sources through. And there wasn't any individuals named. There was nothing concrete. It was just innuendo. And from my point of view, and knowing what the actual truth was, and knowing exactly what happened at the club, and Greg Miller keeping every key individual at our club informed as to what went on, and to hear some of the rubbish and the inaccuracies, it was just most disappointing, and it didn't do anything to enhance or help our the North Melbourne Football Club today.
Did you think all the coverage was that wide of the mark, or just some of it?
No, well, I reckon probably you probably got 40%, 35% right, and the rest was down the Googler.
How do you estimate that, Rohan? A lot of lies, 35% right?
Well, to be quite blunt about it, most of the lies we heard in last week were coming from North Melbourne. I mean, let's be honest about it. If that story hadn't been in the press last weekend, no one, including all the North Melbourne people they supposedly want to inform, would have any idea what's going on. So, I mean, how much credibility can you put in that statement? I sat at a lunch on Saturday and listened to Mark Dawson say pretty much the same thing, talk about scurrilous press reporting. which we're a very easy target for clubs or individuals wanting to lash out and sort of look at to cover their own shortcomings. But Mark Dawson a few days earlier had said in response to our story there was no truth in it, people are just making up a story. Well, can I say I just hope other stories we make up this year are as close to the mark as that one was.
Lee, you're surprised that the coach would enter so heavily into the merger discussion.
The press, they don't like it when they're questioned, do they?
Well, there's got to be a good reason for it, Lee.
It's all right, Rohan. I'm on your side now. It's okay.
Thanks.
It's okay.
But Dennis Pagan sounds as though he has involved himself in the discussion about how far North has gone down the track.
Well, let's face it, the problem is no one's quite sure who told who what, really, and how much. I mean...
But he's saying he's been fully briefed by Greg Miller.
Yes, that's interesting, isn't it? And how long ago was he fully briefed, I suppose? It's well, one thing about Dennis is like most top clubs. When you're a top club, you don't want publicity, really, because you sort of automatically get it. You only want publicity when you're a sort of struggling club and you need it to keep your profile up. And I think North, because they believe they're on the verge of potentially a premiership team, I think they're more paranoid about publicity than most in any shape or form.
And the impression that they've been hiding something, I think, is probably what has the greatest potential to sink this merger. I mean, to be seen to be coming out and say, OK, look, here's what's been going on, let's throw it over to the members and supporters and see what they think. As a PR move, I think how they played last week was just disastrous, really.
How they played?
Well, how they played the news of the merger. Yeah. I mean, they just... all they did was increase the air of suspicion and the feeling people had, and presumably North Melbourne supporters had, that they had something to hide. I mean, it's the last thing you want people to think.
Do we know, I was just going to say, do we know, because of North Melbourne's private ownership thing, how much does a small group have to do with making the decision, and how much does their general membership?
Well, there seems to be a bit of debate about this, and we certainly can't get any answers out of North, but someone I was talking to today was speculating that when we're talking about paying out the shareholders, which is one of the major parts of the deal, that can't just be the major shareholders. You've got to pay out all shareholders.
Any shareholder.
And from what I understand, the amount invested all up in those shares by everyone is somewhere close to $2 million. So couple that with Fitzroy's debt of 2.3, it's not going to leave that much change out of $6 million. Also included in the shareholders, don't forget, are the ubiquitous Friends of Carlton, who supposedly bought about $300,000 worth when Carlton tried to take over North in the late 80s. So who knows, maybe we might see the Navy Blues sort of heading in for the kill again.
We live in interesting times. Certainly there's a toughness and an aggression about North Melbourne on and off the field, just a little reminiscent of Richmond back in the early 1970s, which we saw very well covered in the documentary made about the 100 years of the VFL/AFL. Repeating the news from the Tribunal, Geelong's Grant Tanner has been suspended for 1 week for striking Greg Williams, and Peter Dean's case is currently being heard. We will bring you news on that as soon as we have it. Coming up, after a break, we'll be talking, among others, to the great Irishman, Jim Stynes, who goes into the record books this weekend.